So here's where we're up to. Jacob ends up with two wives because his uncle tricked him, Leah and Rachel. And he prefers Rachel. That's the one he wanted to marry. As a result, God gives Leah children right away. And Rachel, like all the women in those generations, our generations at that time, were barren. So Leah starts having children, and she has 4 children, one after the other. Rachel's upset, and she complains to Jacob, who answers her in an insensitive fashion. And she says, okay, take my maidservant to wife. And the maidservant has 2 children. Leah, observing that she has stopped giving birth to children, asks Jacob to take her maidservant to wife, which he does. And they have 2 children. So we're now up to 8. Now up to 8. And we pointed out that Leah's response to having children made a big deal out of numbers 3 and 4. 3, she said, now my husband will accompany me. And 4, she didn't mention her husband or love or accompaniment. All she said was, now I'm going to give thanks to Hashem. So that needs to be explained. Now comes an incident which is really shocking. On the bottom of 155, especially shocking if you share certain stereotypes about our place in the ancient Near East. Verse 14, Reuven, that's Leah's oldest, went out in the days of the wheat harvest. He found dudaim in the field. Dudaim are flowers which were associated with fertility, and brought them to Leah's mother. Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's dudaim. She said to her, Leah answered Rachel, was your taking my husband insignificant? And now to take even my son's dudaim? Now, given what I've said so far about the story, those words are absolutely inexplicable. Leah is complaining that Rachel took Leah's husband? Excuse me, Jacob worked 7 years to marry Rachel. Leah got in only because her father cheated Jacob. In what way did Rachel take Leah's husband? That's very peculiar. Okay, she's less loved. You can understand that. She was pushed in against Jacob's will. Okay, I'll come back to that. So she says, you took my husband, now you want to take my son's dudaim also? Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with you tonight in return for your son's dudaim. You see, says Leah to Rachel, tonight's my night. Tonight's my night. You want the dudaim? Let me take your place. And Rachel says, she offers this. You can take my place. So it's the night is Rachel's night. And Rachel says, you can take my place if you give me some of the flowers. Fine. 16, when Jacob came in from the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, it is to me that you must come, for I have clearly hired you with my son's dudaim. So he lay with her that night. Who's calling the shots here, boys and girls? Who's running the show here? If this is the ancient Near East, you have a rich man, he has a harem. He has a bunch of wives. Polygamy is practiced universally by the rich and the powerful. And it's the man who calls the shots. He decides what he wants and gets what he wants. Here it's the exact opposite. Somehow there was a schedule, and it was Rachel's night. And Rachel says to Leah, let's make a deal. You give me the flowers, I'll give Jacob to you. They conclude the deal. Leah goes out to Jacob and says, oh, you think you're going to Rachel? I know, because it's on the calendar. Well, surprise, you're coming to me. Does Jacob have any say in this? Doesn't look like it. It looks like the women are totally in control. Try this out on your history professors or your anthropology professors, and see whether they can find anything similar to this anywhere in the ancient Near East, that the sexual relations of a man with his wives is under the sole control of the wives. And Leah is immediately rewarded. 17, God hearkened to Leah. She conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, this is because I gave my maidservant to my husband. So now she's fertile again. Called him Yisachar, and then she conceived and bore him a sixth son. God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will make his permanent home with me. I've borne him 6 sons. Here again, the number comes up. The number came up with 3, and the number came up with 6. In between, she never cited any numbers. She called the name Zvulun. Afterwards, she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Okay, let's stop there for the moment. Now, what did Leah mean when she said, you took away my husband? Now, I can only answer that by filling in some of the oral tradition. I can't deduce it from the verses. We have mentioned there are at least 2 types of interpretations. One where you can deduce it from the verses and prove that what you say is true. The other is where you add in extra information and then you can explain what the verses say. And since, as I told you, in science, all you ever get is explanations. You never get deductions. So one shouldn't look down on explanations as if they were trivial. Jacob took up residence with his uncle. His uncle had a reputation that he was a trickster, a cheat. And when he agreed to work 7 years for the right to marry Rachel, Rachel said to him, you're not going to get out of this clean. My father is very smart, and he's very crooked, and he's going to cheat you. And Jacob said, I'm just as smart as he is. I'm just as smart as he is. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a secret formula. So that at night, the night of the wedding, when I and some woman or other make it off in the darkness, I will simply ask that woman for the secret formula. And if it's you, you'll tell it to me. And if it's Leah, because he wants to switch her, I'll know that it's Leah because she won't know the formula. And Rachel agreed. That was the setup until the day of the wedding. The day of the wedding, Rachel put herself in her sister's position and she said, I can't do this to her. I can't do this to her. I know what my father's planning because I know him. And if she doesn't know the formula and Jacob explodes at that time, she's going to be horribly, horribly embarrassed, devastated. So Rachel told Leah the formula. Rachel told Leah the formula. And when they go off in the darkness, Jacob says, what's the formula? And the woman walking with him says, the formula is, and she spells it out. So he thinks it's Rachel. That's why he doesn't know till the next morning that it's Leah. Because he had a way that he thought would be accurate in identifying the woman. And he got back the formula that he set up. In the morning, it turns out not to be, but Leah remains married to him. She remains his wife. Unlike what would have happened had he discovered before the night was over and exploded and so forth and so on, then she wouldn't have remained married. So she saved her sister's honor. The Talmud praises Rachel here to the skies. To analyze it in detail, I'm not going to do that, but this is what she did. Okay, but I still haven't explained why Leah says later, you took my husband. Because Rachel, exquisite in loving kindness, some of you have been here for a few weeks, remember we talk about Abraham and Sarah, where they traded actions of loving kindness. Rachel convinced Leah that she had the right to marry him. That Rachel's marrying him wasn't correct. Even though Jacob chose her, she said to her older sister, you're the older sister, and you should go first. And if you haven't been married up until now, so that means that the powers that be want you to go first. I'm the one who's in the wrong place. Meaning, if she just gives her the formula, then Leah is going to owe Rachel a gigantic, gigantic debt of gratitude. without being told the formula, she would have been utterly disgraced and left without marrying Jacob. Would have been horrible. So if she doesn't take any other steps, Rachel is going to create a gigantic debt of gratitude in Leah to Rachel. Great people don't do that. With great people, as we saw with Abraham and Sarah, when great people do a favor for somebody else, they try to paint it that indeed they're receiving a favor. Not that they're doing a favor, they're receiving a favor. So here, Rachel at least tries to neutralize the favor. Doing you a favor? Saving you? No. I'm just recognizing what's abstractly correct, what's abstractly right. You belong here. It's your position. For whatever reason Jacob wanted me, but you are the right person to be here. So she convinces her. So Leah goes in full of confidence that this is what's really right. As things continue to develop, Jacob shows more favor to Rachel than to Leah. He's closer to Rachel than Leah. He prefers Rachel over Leah. Leah says, well, then something's wrong. Since I'm the right person, I was the person who deserved it, the bond should have been with me. If the bond isn't with me, then she says to Rachel, you're at fault. You're stealing him from me. Now put yourself in Rachel's shoes. I mean, this is gigantic. Not only did she give her the formula so she won't be embarrassed and end up being married to Jacob, but she convinces her that she's the number one and she's the one who belongs there. And now Rachel is accused of stealing Jacob from Leah, and she doesn't say a word. Try it on for size. Imagine that you were playing out this role. You could write a very exquisite historical novel about this, taking all the midrashim, what was done for Rabbi Kiva's wife. This is an extraordinary performance on Rachel's part. And when she says, when Leah accuses her of stealing her husband, stealing Jacob from her, she doesn't even answer. She could say, what are you talking? You know what I did for you? No. She wants her act of kindness for her sister to be complete. Okay? Now, one other piece from the oral tradition to explain the numbers. There was a tradition that Jacob is going to give birth to 12 tribes. 12 tribes. How are they going to divide up? There was also a tradition that 2 other women were going to get involved, one way or another. The natural thought that Leah started with is 4 apiece. That would be natural. That's why when she gets to 3, she says, okay, I've given my husband 3 children. That's my full share. Now he's going to appreciate me. Gets 4? 4, she doesn't mention her husband anymore. All she says is, I have to give thanks to God because he's given me more than my share. More than my share. Okay. Now, Rachel's handmaid goes in, has 2. Leah's handmaid goes in and has 2. Rachel wants the flowers. Leah says to Leah, you can have relations with him. And she does. She gives birth to number 5. Then she gives birth to number 6. That's half of the 12. Half of the 12 coming only from her. That's why 6 is important. That's why 6 is important. Now, what's the score? 6 for Leah, 2 for Rachel's handmaid, and 2 for Leah's handmaid. That's 10 out of the 12. And now she gets pregnant. Now she gets pregnant. What's going to happen if she has another boy? Then there'll only be 1 left for Rachel. There'll only be 1 left for Rachel. And she'll have less than handmaids. And that's a disgrace. So Leah, she got pregnant with a boy. She was pregnant with a boy. Leah prayed for a miracle that she would change into a girl. And that's why number 7 is a girl. Because Leah prayed for that. And one very interesting piece of confirmation for this is much later. Rachel then has a boy. But when Rachel dies, take a look at page 187. We'll come back to the story in a minute. 189, sorry. Rachel has a son, Yosef, before they leave. This is after they've left. She's pregnant. And and she's having difficulty in childbirth. 17, towards the bottom of the page. It was when she had difficulty in labor. The midwife said to her, "Have no fear, for this one too is a son for you." Have no fear, for this. She's dying. She's just about to die. Have no fear, for this one is also a son. What is she talking about? What is she talking? She's dying. Rachel is dying. So don't be afraid, because this was also a son. And it would be a daughter. Makes a difference? Sure, because this is the second one of the sons, the tribes. If she has a daughter, that means she's left with only one, and that one means she's less than the handmaids, and the 12th will have to be made up somewhere else. The other women are still there. So the midwife, who knows this, she understands what the stakes are, says to her, "Have no fear, because this one's also a son. You now have 2 boys, not less than the 2 handmaids." Okay? That's what's going on with the numbers. As I said, this is an explanation. Okay, back to 157. Verse 22. God remembered Rachel. God hearkened to her, which means she's praying, and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son. She said, "God has taken away my disgrace." The word there is Asaph. Sounds like Yosef. She called his name Yosef, saying, Yosef means to add to. May Hashem add for me another son, because I must have at least 2, because I can't be less than the handmaids. That's what's going on with all these details. Now, I want to stop and just comment on something which you need to know. 22 says God remembered Rachel. God remembered. Does that mean that in the interim, God sort of lost track of things? Had a forgetting spell, and then suddenly, maybe it was on his Google Calendar, 16 years have gone by, so then I was trying to do something. Obviously not, but why not? Why not? If the text says he remembered, why doesn't that imply that he forgot in the interim? Because the word in Hebrew does not mean what the English word remembered means. And I'll prove it to you. We're in 157. We'll go back there in a minute. But if you take a look in the book of Esther, page 1253, this is a comment about the verb in Hebrew lizkor, which is translated remember, and a lot of other psychological verbs as they're applied to God. Page 1253, you have the second chapter of the book of Esther. In the first chapter, Ahasuerus throws a party, a 6 months party. He knew how to party. Even Los Angeles could learn something from that. And in the course of the party, at the end, he wants the queen to make an appearance, and she refuses. It's a political crisis, and he has her removed. She's fired as queen, and the oral tradition says she died. And there's a whole political upheaval, and he takes care of that. Chapter 2, when 1253 starts, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, that's the previous queen, and what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. He remembered. Now, how am I supposed to picture this? The king has a banquet for the whole kingdom. It goes on for 6 months. He asks the queen to make an appearance. She refuses. It's a political crisis. He has her removed. Months go by with other things to take care of. And then he's strolling to Paris, and he says to his aides, I haven't seen Vashti in a while. Is she in Acapulco running up the credit cards? Where is she? Oh, slipped my mind. Yes, we did depose her 3 months ago, didn't we? We got rid of her. Oh, good. I'm glad I remembered. That's probably not right? That's probably not correct. The verb lizkor in biblical Hebrew means to make a present decision on the basis of a past fact. It has nothing to do with remembering or forgetting. Not everything that you know about the past is relevant to every decision that you make. When you're making a decision, you sift through what you know and pick out the relevant pieces of information. Now he's deciding to get a new queen. So he's now decided to act on the fact that he deposed Vashti. That's what lizkor means. And when it's said of God, that's what lizkor means. Lizkor means to make a decision on the basis of that past fact. It does not imply in any way that God is capable of forgetting in the interim. You got a question?
Yeah, what's it called? Zikor?
Lizkor. The root is Zayin Chaf Resh. Zayin Chaf Resh. Okay, now back to 157. That's what I think that's what, yeah. So, Rachel has a child. 25.
So
Yeah.
is that statement that God says God remembered, meaning so he looked back at what Rachel did in regards with Leah, and he said, "Wow, that was amazing." And
that it could be that it isn't clear what it is particularly that he remembered, but there may have been a setup plan from the beginning. Actually, there's something else going on. As you'll see instantly, right now, Jacob wants to go home, and the Midrash says that it's because Joseph was born, because Joseph will protect him from certain dangers in the future. Okay, you're right to ask, and the text doesn't make it clear, but it makes it clear that it's based on something in the past, which now becomes relevant, and triggers the following act. Yeah.
It seems from as if the text that after Leah gave this like little backhand to Rachel of like, oh, taking my husband wasn't enough, that she was rewarded after that immediately by 2 other children. So what? I just don't understand that. Why would she be rewarded with 2 other children after that?
It's really very interesting. In the book of Job raises all sorts of objections against God. In the middle of the book, there's a verse that says, "Yov bli das yidaber." He speaks without das, without understanding. Naive reader says, "Okay, listen. If you don't understand, keep your mouth shut. Here you're shooting off your mouth, and you don't understand, so you're guilty." The Talmud doesn't take it that way. Rav and Baba Basra says, since he was under such pressure, since he was in such pain, he didn't have understanding, and therefore he's excused for the things that he says. The verse is exculpating him, if you like big words. The verse is excusing him. It's giving not a justification, but an excuse to protect him from critique because he was in such pain. So we see that a person can be under such pressure that what he does isn't considered his full responsibility. And I think that you can say that for her. It would have been better if she had been more generous. She had no clue that Rachel was generous with her, and she saw that her husband preferred Rachel to her. I agree with you that it would have been better had not said, but I don't think you can think of it as a crime that deserves a punishment. There's more going on here than that, and I'm going to leave it at that for now. There are other certain things hidden here. Maybe we'll get to them, but I want to continue the thread of this story. So Rachel has a son, and it was 25. When Rachel had been given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Lavan, "Grant me leave, that I may go home to the place of my land. Give my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and I will go, for you're aware of my service that I have labored for you." Now, he contracted to work 7 years. If he's asking for leave, it must be the 7 years are up. Here's a lesson in biblical style. 25 starts, and it was when Rachel had given birth to Joseph. Gee, if 25 had just said, "and then," you'd know that. By the way, the paragraph breaks in English are totally artificial. If you want to see where there are paragraph breaks, you got to look in the Hebrew. The Hebrew is all one block of text. No paragraph breaks at all. This is true in all the pages. Don't read anything into a paragraph break in the English. That's just because they expect your attention span to be about 45 seconds, so they give you 3 or 4 lines to read, and then another paragraph. And you feel good. Okay, I completed that. And they know who the readers are. Okay, so it says when Rachel gave birth to Joseph. That's a statement of causation. That's not a statement of chronology, it's a statement of causation. If you want to get the chronology, all you have to say at the beginning of 25 is, "and then." I just told you Joseph was born, and then this happened. No. And it was when Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "The 7 years are over, and Joseph is born." Those are the triggers for his request to go home. Now, yeah, I'll make a point of this because we'll use it later. You could, I can't force this on you. It's a subtlety, but I think later you'll see that it's confirmed. How does Jacob express himself? "Give me my wives and my children, for whom I served you, and I will go." Give me my wives? If they're my wives, then they're mine. If I ask you to give me something, presumably it's because it's yours. That's why I'm asking you to give it to me. So this looks like there's some ambiguity here. There was a contract. Jacob fulfilled his part of the contract. By rights, everything belongs to him. Yet he says to his father-in-law, uncle, give me my wives and my children. You'll see that this plays to Lavan's psychology perfectly, but it's going to take a while to get there. And I will go, for you are aware of my service that I labored for you. You know very well I served you 24/7 for 14 years, and you benefited terrifically from it. So you can't have any complaints about my service. And Lavan himself will admit to that later on. And therefore, I have every right to go. Lavan said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, that's a statement of an inferior to a superior. That's a statement of somebody who's asking for something. Who's asking for a favor. I have learned by divination, that's the kind of guy he is. You know, he plays with the entrails of birds and Ouija boards and things like that. That Hashem has blessed me on account of you. So he's acknowledging it. What I have gained in these 14 years is because of you. And he said, specify your wage to me and I will give it. I want you to stay on as a hired worker. Up until now, you served me 14 years for nothing. Now I'm willing to pay you whatever you ask. You tell me what you want, because I have gained tremendously and I want to continue to gain. Jacob said back to him, you know how I served you, and you know what your livestock were with me. For the little that you had before I came has expanded substantially, and Hashem has blessed you with my coming. And now, when will I also do something for my own house? I have 2 wives and 2 other women, and I have a passel of children. I have a household. I too have to do for myself, for my own substance. Right? He said, Lavan says to him, what shall I give you? Jacob said, don't give me anything. Don't give me anything. If you'll do this thing for me, I'll resume pasturing and guarding your flocks. And he sets up an agreement for payment. The word give is appropriate for a gift. That's where the word gift comes from give. When you work at a job and you have a contract, your employer is not giving you anything, he's paying you something. Because you worked for it and you deserved it. But Lavan doesn't look at like it that way. Whenever anybody gets anything from me, it's I'm giving it to him. Because it's really mine, and he has no claims on me, and I don't owe anybody anything. Sometimes I give free gifts. That's his mentality. Jacob, as we say in Hebrew, shtelzach, and in Yiddish, he says, I'm not having that. I'm not having that. I'm having a legal agreement where I'm being paid for work. You're not giving me anything. Don't say later how generous you were with me, that I owe you something for your kindness. I'm working for a wage. Let me pass through the whole flock today, remove from there every speckled and spotted lamb, every brownish lamb, the sheep, the spoiled, spotted and speckled among the goats. That'll be my wage. Let my integrity testify for me in the future when it comes before you regarding my wage. Any among the goats is not speckled or spotted, among the sheep is not brownish or stolen, it is stolen in my possession. Now, it's very tricky what's going on here, and I'm not going to work it out in detail, who got the first stock of speckled and brown and spotted and everything else. Some say, and you can work it out in the words that he's telling Lavan, you take them all off for yourself. Go away with them. Several days' journey. I will only take the newly born, blemished, or colored, speckled, spotted, ringed, striped animals, and that's how you'll know that I didn't steal anything from you, because they will all have a physical sign. So this will be an absolutely objective test as to whether I take only what I have contracted on. And Lavan is overjoyed. He's overjoyed. Agreed, if only it will be as you say. So he, Lavan, removed on that very day the ringed, spotted, he-goats and all the speckled, spotted goats, everyone that contained white as well as the brownish ones, sheep, and left them in charge of his sons. Lavan's sons, who are older, and he put a distance of 3 days between himself and Jacob. so that there be no confusion of the populations of animals. And Lavan and Jacob tended Lavan's remaining flock. Now, the commentators here ask a question in terms of the scenario. Jacob left his family to go and get married. He came and took up residence with Lavan. He saw that he needed to marry Rachel. He contracted to work 7 years for Rachel. That was on his own initiative. He offered that, and he worked 7 years, and he married Rachel. Okay, there was a trick, and he got Leah instead, and he has to work another 7 years. That was forced on him. Now the 14 years are over. He's paid up his debts. He has every right to leave. Lavan begs him to stay. Why does he stay? Why does he stay? Why doesn't he say, look, I know that you've profited greatly. You've profited greatly. You're much better off than you were when I came. I have to go home. The reason that some commentators explain is out of gratitude for taking him in. Out of gratitude for taking him in. We pointed out, the minute he took him in, he put him to labor. He worked for a month for nothing, and then Lavan, embarrassed, says, okay, you're my relative, but you shouldn't serve for nothing. Say, name your wages, and he contracts for 7 years. Lavan was not running a charity service. You're staying by me? Work. But still, he took him in. That debt of gratitude, Jacob said, I can't just walk out on him. Similar is a verse in the Torah that appears several times. The Torah says to the Jewish people, when you have future dealings with Egyptians, treat them kindly. Treat them kindly because they took you in. They gave you a place. You were a wanderer, a stranger, you had no citizenship, and you were in their land. Treat them with sensitivity, with kindness. Now, as you may have heard, the last 90 so years in Egypt were bitter slavery, including at one point drowning newborn males in the river. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They took you in. They took us in, and we owe them a certain recognition for the fact that they took us in. So it could be that Jacob is foreshadowing that characteristic by saying, you're asking me for my help. You did take me in, even though I've been already 14 years separated from my family. Still, I'm prepared to stay with you. Okay? He stays another 6 years. All right? Okay. Now, there's a whole sequence here of Jacob using sticks with various colors and so forth and so on, and the flocks giving birth to one thing or other. I'm not going to go into that because it'll be implied by what's coming up later. The bottom line is that he becomes very, very rich. The flocks that he's tending bear the kinds of animals that they contracted should be his, and he becomes very, very rich, and he acquires servants, so that his band of helpers becomes substantial. Becomes exceedingly prosperous. He gets camels and donkeys. He's become a wealthy person. It takes about 6 years. Chapter 31. I'll show you one thing now which is really amazing. 6 years go by. Jacob's become very wealthy, powerful. He heard the words of Lavan's sons. Lavan's sons are his first cousins. Lavan is his uncle. So these are his first cousins, saying, Jacob has taken all that belonged to our father, and from that which belonged to our father, he amassed all this wealth. Even though there's an objective criterion, he couldn't have stolen a single animal because they're all spotted and speckled and striped and brown and so on and so on. But still, that's the way they looked at it. You can hear and hear a prelude for anti-Semitism throughout the ages. Jacob also noted that Lavan's disposition, that it was not toward him in the early days, even his uncle. So his uncle and his cousins are turning against him. And Hashem said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers, your native land, I'll be with you. Okay. So his cousins are against him, his uncle's against him, and God tells him, go home. Now watch what Jacob does with this information. This is also an astonishing sequence. Jacob sent and summoned Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock. And he said to them, he now makes a long speech to the two wives. He tells them to come to the flock because then there are no spies. Nobody's hiding around the wall and under the table and in the treetops. They're all alone. This is a private conference. I've noticed that your father's disposition is not toward me as the earlier days. But the God of my father was with me. Now you know that it was with all my might that I served your father. Yet your father mocked me and changed my wage 100 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. The initiation of tension between Jacob and Laban is because Laban changed the terms of the contract over and over again. Now this is Jacob speaking to his wives. Later in the story, Jacob will say this to Laban in his face in public, and Laban will not deny it. If you would stipulate speckled one shall be your wages, then the entire flock bore speckled one. Well, it should be speckled. If you would stipulate ringed ones, the entire flock bore ringed ones. Thus God took away your father's livestock and gave them to me. It once happened at the mating time of the flock that I raised my eyes in a dream. I saw in a dream, behold, the he-goats that mounted the flock were ringed, speckled, and checkered. Angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, raise your eyes, if you please, and see that all the he-goats mounting the flock are ringed, speckled, and checkered. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you, and I'm protecting you. Miraculously, I'm protecting you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar. Those who were with us with a dream, remember this? Where you made me a vow. Now arise, leave this land, and return to your native land. End of speech. End of speech. Jacob calls his wives to the flock and says to them, here's the history, here are the dynamics, here's what happened, and now God has told me to go home. That's the end of the speech. Now watch how they respond. Rachel and Leah replied and said to him, have we then still a share and inheritance in our father's house? Are we not considered by him as strangers? For he has sold us and even totally consumed our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. So now, whatever God has said to you, do. This is an astonishing speech. It's an astonishing speech. Every part of it has an important message. The end of it, the wives say to Jacob, what God has told you to do, do. Is it up to them? The creator of the universe told Jacob, go home. Is it up to them to decide, to agree, to disagree? What's going on here? Even if you're not suffering from the stereotype of the ancient Near East, anyone with a stereotype of religious living would expect Jacob to come home and say, ladies, God told us to go home, pack up, we're leaving in 3 hours. No, he puts it in front of them as a history and as a fact and waits for their response. Now, he's asking them to leave their father. The last 20 years, he has been living with them together, with their father in his town, in their home culture, and so forth and so on. So he's putting it in front of them to get their reaction. Are you prepared to leave? How do you feel about the proposition? This is not exquisite. Would you expect this from, especially a misogynist religious point of view? He just puts it in front of them and waits for their reaction. So their first reaction is, we have no sympathy for our father. We know that he's cheated you and us. We know that he's not worthy of our respect and not worthy of our love. And we are prepared to join you. Whatever God tells you to do, do. Now, they stick in something else. Jacob offered to work 7 years for Rachel. When he got Leah instead, he worked 7 years for Rachel after Leah. Is that the norm? Is it the norm to pay for a marriage? Are a man's daughters his property to sell as he pleases? In the ancient Near East, yes. In the contemporary Near East, in many places, yes. A man's daughters are up for sale. When Jacob pays for the right to marry Rachel and Leah, is he also buying these girls? Is it the Torah's values that also a man's daughters are up for sale? Look at what Rachel and Leah say again. They say, have we then still a share in inheritance in our father's house? Are we not considered by him as strangers? He treated us as strangers. He did not treat us as daughters. Why? For he has sold us. We don't do that. In our minuscule subculture, we don't do that. Let the whole of the ancient Near East sink. It had nothing to do with us. In our subculture, we don't do that. A man doesn't sell his daughters. If he sold us as daughters, if he sold us, he's not treating us as daughters. And then they add another clause. He's even totally consumed our money. Meaning, when Abraham's emissary, Eliezer, came to contract a marriage for Isaac, he brought along a great deal of money. He brought a great deal of money to this family, to Lavan himself, to Bethuel, his father. And he gave out the money. But who did he give the money to? He gave the money to Rebekah. He didn't give the money to the father. He gave the money to Rebekah. It's the bride who gets the money, not the father. You don't pay the father for the right to marry the girl. The girl gets the money. So she says, they say, you paid him 14 years of free labor. If he had taken the money and put it in an escrow account and saved it for us, and when we got married, handed it over to us, that would have been understandable. But no, he charged for it and he consumed the money. You don't do that with your daughter, not in our subculture. That's wrong. And therefore, he treated us like strangers. Here's an amazing speech where some of the true values of the Torah come out direct. You with me? Okay, we'll continue on with the story next week. It's a long and interesting, complicated story.